everyone. My name is Sarah Backer, and I'm a policy associate at the Good Food Institute. Welcome to our third installment of the GFI Pulse Canada webinar series. Today, we're going to be discussing how protein diversification can support growers and strengthen rural economies and bring a host of other benefits. And so today I'm joined by four panelists presenting from both the US and Canada. Before I let them introduce themselves, I want to just review some quick housekeeping items. So we're recording today's session, and within the next few days, we'll share recordings of all three webinars with everyone who registered for this event. If you have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll save time at the end for Q&A, but when you have a question, go ahead and submit it anytime during the presentation. If you'd like to engage with others who are attending this webinar, you can use the chat feature. So thanks again to our speakers for joining. And to get us started, I'll invite each of them to introduce themselves and share a little bit about who they are and where you're joining us from. So let's start with Brett.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, my name is Brett Casavant. I'm the CEO of C-Merak. We're located in Tisdale, Saskatchewan, so northeast Saskatchewan. We mill pulses, mostly faba beans and peas as well to some extent. Dry milling. We were born from a fourth generation farm, so we're very vertically integrated through to the ingredient, from farm to ingredient. And we've been in business per se, producing our own ingredients now since early 2023, and so we're fairly new entrant to the industry, but we're excited about dry milled ingredients and the pulse industry in general.
So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today to talk about arguably the best topic, which is pulses. So my name is Chelsea Didinger, and I'm the founder of A Legume a Day, which is essentially a pulse educational outreach platform. I also run the associated website and social media too. But a bit of background is I got my PhD in nutrition, all focused on pulses. And I really took a translational approach. So citizen science, developing extension resources and classes and everything, and then evaluating that to see how it was impacting behavior. And a primary goal was to really better understand motivators and barriers for what drives pulse consumption and ultimately increase pulse consumption for all the incredible associated benefits that the science firmly backs. So I do work across the food system, anywhere from partnering with growers, spending time in the field, researchers, companies, organizations to better understand pulses, and also travel within the US and also internationally to see what's happening in pulse space and relay that information.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Yeah, I think I'm next. So I'm Margaret Hughes from Avena Foods. I'm responsible for sales and marketing, R&D, and sustainability at Avena. And Avena is a miller of allergen-friendly pulse and oat ingredients. The pulse site actually started in 1936, so it was the premier Canadian pulse company, and actually began milling food ingredients in the 1990s. The oat side was started by pedigreed seed growers in 2008, and that was where they were committed to supplying people with celiac, gluten intolerance, and wheat allergies with gluten-free oats, and that was in 2008. Our vision is partnering for safe, healthy diets in a sustainable world, and thank you so much for inviting us. We're great supporters of Pulse Canada, so it was really wonderful that we could be a part of this event today.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Manuel. I think I'm going next. I'm VP of Commercial Operations and Merchandising for Purus, which is a long way of saying I'm responsible for everything from getting our unique seed varieties of peas specifically out to our growers across the United States. We're currently growing peas in over 27 states right now. So we've probably got one of the widest footprints, most unique footprints in the pulse market in the US. And we also buy a lot of peas out of Canada as well too. And my job is really to make sure I'm tying all the peas together, from selling seeds to the growers all the way through to fulfilling product for all the unique ingredients that our customers have. Really excited to be here, really excited to talk about the growth in ingredient market. And broadly in my background, I've been in food and agricultural food manufacturing for 21 years here now through companies like General Mills and Miller Milling, and I'm on my third year here at Purus. So excited to be here and excited to talk about pulses.
Thanks, everyone. So to start us off, Chelsea, I know as you shared, you play a little bit of a different role, but for the ingredient producers and suppliers on the call, what kind of types of pulse crops do you work with, and what ingredients or products do you make with them? So go ahead and jump in.
I can jump in first because I think we've got a very narrow lens on the front end. We buy yellow peas. That's what we do, and we take those peas, we split the peas, and then we move them to our wet isolation plant, and we're making a pea protein isolate out of it. But what's really interesting is what happens after that fact. People hear plant-based protein and they assume it's going into things like alternative meats, things of that nature. When really, I would say roughly 70 to 80% of our customers are taking it and putting it into, whether it's ready to mix or already ready to drink, it's mostly going into beverages. It's not really about the plant-based itself, but just another way to get protein into the diet. So, everything from beverages to snacks and cereals is becoming a boom market as well too. Bars, crisps, lots of other food ingredients, as well as alternative meat sources as well too. But really, see a wide breadth of ingredients that these products are going into.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. Thanks, John. Margaret or Brett?
So Avena mills all the pulses: peas, beans, chickpeas, and lentils. And actually, if you look right behind me, you can see some of the meals, the grit or the cracked pulses that we actually supply to different food manufacturers. We also supply beverage manufacturers, like John spoke of, because we're an oat miller. So we'll supply oat milk, we'll supply pea milk. So our specialty really is we do whole products. So we very much value the protein, the fiber, the nutrient dense pulses, but we sell them as whole or decorticated products. We don't actually fractionate, and they go into the bakery trade, the snack trade, all the different verticals that John referred to.
Yeah, and I think that, thanks, John and Margaret. I think that we kind of fit in the middle. We're the same. We're born from a farm, right? So we do what we've been doing is really trying to mill products that grow well in our area of the world, be at the source, and bring those crops in, clean them, dehull them, and mill them into proteins and starches and fibers, but also whole flours we do as well. And we do some splits or decorticated products and stuff like that as well, if customers require. And so we're trying to valorize things and go into all different markets. Like John said, it isn't by any stretch all TVPs and meat analogs and things like that. There's a lot into baked goods and into breads and there's even some of our products go into dairy alternatives as well, into yogurts and things like that. And so we're very proud of our diverse portfolio, but it does take quite a team to manage all that too when you're supporting the development of your customers and stuff in these different areas as well too. So, but yes, we try to hit as many markets as we can, and almost all in food for our main products like the protein.
Thanks, all. That's very helpful. And John, you actually kind of touched on this before too, when you talked about your work with farmers, but I'd be curious if you could just walk us a little bit more through how those pulses get from the farm and then turned into ingredients. If there's anything to add for folks who are maybe a little bit less familiar with the process and how the relationship to growers looks like.
Yeah, for us, we work directly with growers, selling seed to them, and we take full production contracts. A lot of act of God contracts to get peas to grow where maybe they're not used to growing. But ultimately, then for our operation, we're bringing those peas back to our own pea splitting facility. From there, we take the hull off, the peas are split, get nice clean pea splits going to our protein isolate facility in Minnesota. From there, they get ground, separated in a wet isolation process, and then it separates the streams of protein, starch, and fiber. And from there, we're spray drying those down into fine powder so they can be easily consumed by our ingredient customers. And so that's really how it goes. But I think it's a key thing to call out. It's a little different from sort of the dry fractionation market, which is kind of taking it the pea splitting level, then further milling and fractionating it using air classification. So I think there's people here pea protein or pea starch and assume they're always the same thing. And I think, even within the wet isolation process, they're not really apples to apples. Same so with the dry frac world. There's a lot of different ways you can separate out those proteins and starch and fibers to make the ingredients that customers need.
If I think about our work with whole pulses and split pulses, one of the things with our grower contracts, we have full traceability right back to each field, and we maintain that traceability right through the dock of the customer. And some of those farmers we worked with for more than 2 and 3 generations. So it's a different, it's not a mass balance, and that's because we have to maintain our allergen-free status, allergen-friendly status.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, and I think it's very interesting. So just to follow up on what I didn't mention in my past talk, is we work with faba beans and yellow peas. We do work very directly with farmers, lots of full production contracts. We really believe that genetics are a cornerstone in the first start of making your production good, and so we like to get into leading edge and proprietary genetics, do some full production contracts, get those crops in, and then we mill away. So we clean them, we dehull them, and we grind them, and then we grind it into a very fine powder, which we then can take the protein and starch particles and separate them based on density. So we're like Purus is doing a very pure protein, a very pure starch. Avena is doing a very whole product, right? A whole flour. And we're kind of in the middle where we're doing a protein, but it has starch in it. And well, mostly what it has is fiber in it, right? And along with the protein, and then our starch has a little bit more protein in it. So our product isn't as pure, but it isn't as intensely processed either. And I think throughout the ingredient world, there's people and applications for all the different products, and it's just what part of the value chain you want to fit into.
Thanks, Brett. That's really helpful. It's great for you to kind of contextualize where you fit versus Purus versus Margaret at Avena. And so then the next question is, I know that you mentioned that there are a lot of different applications for pulse products, including plant-based meat alternatives. But my question for you is, do you have a sense of the extent to which pulses grown in North America and Canada are used for plant-based foods and specifically meat alternatives? And I know, John, you gave us a breakdown of like 70%, correct me if I'm wrong, 70% for what did you say, blended or mix-in?
Yeah, sort of either ready to mix or ready to drink, like going into beverage, whether that be, whether it be a dairy alternative or oftentimes just something like as simple as a protein shake or just a way to get protein in there.
Yes. So I guess my question for the rest of the panelists, and also John, you can chime in too, is that your sense of what the breakdown is like for these types of products that are being made from pulses?
I think it varies greatly,
Yes,
right? If you look at John, for example, very soluble product, right? Good in beverages, things like that. The more whole you get, the larger grain product you have, the less it likes to stay in water or in suspension. And so you start to get more into baked goods, more into, extruded products, more into different things like that. So we find that you have multiple treatments that you build in your process to try to hit different markets and that are proprietary or patented or different things like that. And so we do try to hit every market that we can, but I would say that we're not 70 or 80% into beverages like the isolate world is by any stretch, right? We do have some stuff into the dairy alternative world for sure. We have customers in that side of it, but probably not much in beverage, probably more into, spreads and cheeses and yogurts and things like that. And then where our biggest push with faba protein, for example, is really right now into breads and baked goods, and our peas is more into extrusion and that type of thing. So we find our niches and find where our product fits, and that's where we build.
And Brett, just to ask you a quick follow-up question, when you say extrusion, what are those extruded products? Are you talking about like TPP? What are you talking about?
Yeah, it varies a lot, right? It's everything from meat analogs and whether it be, the chicken meat, beef or pork replacements, but also into puffed snacks and into, they extrude into, the protein bars and different things like that to some extent and everything like that. So it's a wide range, and there's dry extrusion and wet extrusion and different products that come out of it and all those things. So it's a lot, right? There's a lot of different things, and you try to make your product work in better in different places, and you treat it different in different situations too. But I would say that was probably where we have the biggest footprint right now, is either it works really well in breads and tortillas and conchas too and stuff like that, to add some protein but still leave the good baking characteristics as well. Those are our two biggest for our company.
And I think, Sarah, as you think
well-
about, the whole pulse market as a whole, there's a whole chunk of it that was going to export that has really been sort of cut off due to all the various risks going on in the geopolitical world right now. And then there was, a large amount of it going to pet food as an application in various forms of pet food. We're certainly seeing, at least on our end, that market start to slow down as sort of the COVID pet boom is waning a bit as well. And sort of those markets even shifting from like dry kibble pet food needs to wet, fresh pet needs growing within that pet food sector. And then on top of it, I think, the sector that we're all here to represent, kind of this ingredient segment of where does this go? I think it brings up just a really interesting topic for everyone on this call to think about. And that's that, at the end of the day, export markets and things of that nature can be very fickle. They can come and they can go. We really focus on building an ingredient market because it's, human demand that's here to last. And it's less so about getting something specifically plant-based into it, but we're finding more and more, I think we're seeing a huge consumer trend of people wanting to put protein into everything. And plant-based proteins are becoming a very economic way to do that as well too. It can be a fairly cheap source of protein, and on top of it, a really great allergen-free source of protein. So it can kind of check a lot of boxes for people just looking to add more proteins on more occasions. And I think the whole industry is doing a good job of really focusing on, feeding this ingredient business, feeding it in a way that, and focusing on taste and innovation in a way that we haven't previously. And that's been helpful to really make food that people love to eat and want to eat more of. And so that's really our hope, is that we can continue to grow these markets and make a really sustainable sort of domestic demand for pulses.
That's helpful, John.
Interesting. If we even move, so very small percentage of pulses are eaten in North America. As you say, most of them are exported. But when you look at the real punch they offer, in terms of nutrition, that 3 servings of pulses a week, 3 servings a week, 55 grams, will actually give you better results in reducing your cholesterol than current medications on the market. And I bet Chelsea has so much to add to that comment.
Yeah, I want to be careful cautioning people to not take medication because that is a different thing. But there have been lots of studies on how incorporating pulses into the diet can be hugely beneficial for so many aspects of health. And one of them does relate to the reduction of total and LDL cholesterol. So that is a big one. And a recent scoping review, when it went through the current literature, that was one of the main findings, is so the benefits for heart health and tied specifically to reductions in cholesterol, also in helping manage type 2 diabetes. So I think nutrition, obviously, I said I have a PhD in nutrition, so you can tell that I might be biased to thinking nutrition is cool. But the nice thing about pulses is that they don't only have the nutrition aspect, they have so much more. They're a critical part of farming systems in North America. They have the benefits for sustainability. Like the list is very long and impressive. And I think the fact that they really are the full package is part of what makes them so rich and so have so many opportunities. And I think we've already, other panelists have spoken to examples of how pea protein is being used, how fava is being used. But I think in the US and in several countries, we're also seeing a lot of innovation with chickpea. I know dairy and yogurt was mentioned. So for instance, there's chickpea protein yogurt, there are granolas with fava protein incorporated. Of course, there's hummus, there's just such a range of ways in which these pulses can be included in whole application or ingredient form. So I think it's really exciting. And dry beans are another big one. So those can be, canned is the main way that they are eaten in the US, but we're also seeing a lot of innovation come into the canned space too, or in pouches, for instance, tying in global flavor profiles, which we know consumers are really interested in. So yes, they have protein. Yes, they have health benefits. Yes, they have taste. Yes, I'll stop here. You get the idea.
Chelsea, a quick follow-up question from you. So you mentioned that you've worked with growers before, and I believe you also said companies. And I'm just wondering, have you had the opportunity to work with growers who their products are going towards like plant-based meat and meat alternatives or dairy alternatives? And also, have you worked with companies that are doing something similar?
Yeah, so I've worked with, well, sometimes the growers will sell actually directly their beans, but that's usually if it's more kind of in an heirloom space, just because the dynamics of processing and packaging and selling all of your own, or they'll sell to restaurants maybe. But oftentimes they'll work with great, processors who take their products and then they will package them either for whole application or sometimes that will be directed into other streams. So it's hard to know. Growers don't always necessarily know exactly how uh, their pulses will end up being used. It depends on the instance. They know they're going towards great different applications. And then in terms of companies, I'm a member of groups like USA Pulses, so I get to interact with some of the great folks on this call, for instance, in that sense. So I'm really excited by all the opportunities we see currently and that we know are coming as well, if that answers your question.
No,
I'm
that's
not sure that it
very
does.
helpful. No, it totally does. Thank you, Chelsea. And I've never seen like I'm sure this is very common in your spaces, but it's great to have so much excitement about pulses and all these different products.
They're exciting. What can we say? This is not a biased audience at all.
So this is shifting gears a little bit here. So when you're evaluating the return on investment for your company and the different farmers that you work with, what are the different considerations that you're balancing? And can you speak to the like ROI benefits that pulse ingredients bring?
Yeah, I can certainly jump into it. I mean, obviously we're working with not just pulses, but one pulse in particular, but I think we definitely see, both, it really starts at the grower level with having to fight with other markets. Right now, a lot of the geopolitical landscape has made it hard to go say like, how many pulses can we go plant next year, right? When geopolitical things move markets and make them, I think next year is going to be a really, really hard year for farmers after a year that's already really hard for growers. So I think just first thinking about the on-farm ROI is super important. And it's why we really want to focus on long-term sustainable markets. We want to get stuff that tastes great, get it into foods that people love. So people not just want to try it, but they want to eat it and then they enjoy it and they want to eat more. And we really find that, the pulse we work with, yellow peas, both the genetic work we've done, the process work we've done helps customers' products get there. But I think that's just, wanted to point out, I think it's a unique challenge this industry is going to really have. The great thing about pulses is that when sort of every market is bad for growers, pulses do great nitrogen fixation. So there's a reason to go plant it beyond just, what the ROI you're going to get on farm, really helping growers to think holistically about what is the benefit you're going to get in a market where there's not much you can grow that's going to go make a lot of money. Sort of a why pulse argument is been effective for us. And I think that's one that's going to keep not anything special that we're doing, but just the nature of pulses themselves.
I think being a farmer first and then getting into ingredients and stuff, that definitely hits home, right? Crop rotation, health of the soil, health of the land. The ROI of pulses, it carries forward into the next crop and the next crop that you grow because the breakdown of nitrogen and things like that. I preach faba beans all the time. They're super deep rooted, right? Getting that root down deep into the soil and bringing those nutrients back up, doing some loosening up of the soil so you can break hard pans up a little bit and stuff like that. That's probably the toughest part is that when you're discussing with farmers initially, if they haven't grown pulses before about the ROI, they maybe, they don't always understand that. People that have grown it before, we have a long list that people want to grow faba beans in our area because there's lots of moisture and they're good in the moist climate, but we need a market. And so that's what we're building, right, as we go, because you need a place to sell to, and the feed market is great as well. You have to have a feed market for everything, but it only carries so much and you need more. And then when you get into us selling our ingredients and the ROI from the actual processor and things like that. It's the same thing. We live in the same world as the grower does. If we can sell into the food market or the pharma market, right? That's your highest value market. And if you're in the pet food or the fish food or things like that market, then that's your mid market. And then if you get into the feed market, that's where you sell into things that you can't move into the higher value market. But you need all three. They all have to be there, and they all support the market. Just like for the grower, if there's no feed market and they're growing peas and they grow off spec peas and they can't get rid of them, well, they're not going to grow for you anymore, right? And so we support the feed market too. We go and do feeding studies of faba beans and things like that to make sure there's a feed market as well, right? With the feed buyers around here and stuff like that too. And we actually grow on our farm probably as many beans for the feed market as we do for the food market, just to make sure there's a market there. And then I think, like, long term, probably over the last 15 years, growing faba beans and the numbers we ran, we haven't been that far off of our benchmark crop, which isn't corn or soybeans, it's canola in our area, right? And so that's the crop that everybody makes the most money on. And if you're close to that or better than that, then people are going to grow acres there. But if you're way below that, they may look for alternatives. And I think that's an important thing, is to have a steady supply. But also, when you factor in the whole value of a pulse, I think it really narrows the gap, even if you're below canola or something like that a bit.
Thanks, Brett. Margaret, anything to add?
Just probably one of the things that we've done in-house to actually make it more attractive for growers is really focus on sustainability and regen ag programs, and having it so that revenue can actually flow through to growers for actually trying out different farm practices on their farms. And that can actually be via we do sustainability impact projects, where a customer will actually pay a grower a certain amount of money to try a practice. And then that customer is given social media information that they can use, that they share with their customers online. So we found, in terms of, if we want to pay our growers a premium, and right now we've been working on a program where, through the regen ag practices that they engage in, we're able to supply that premium to them. So to attract them, because it is, you're competing with all other crops, as both John and Brett said. So it's not even trying to create, it's making the most of the value add. We're nitrogen fixing. We work to get metrics. We work with Field to Market Canada metrics. We work to get metrics around that, so we can have hard data that actually shows improvements and shows customers through our the food manufacturers we work with, just what's being done on the ground, literally.
Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah.
I think that we just did a really great job of talking about how you all engage with one side of the value chain. So the producers and the growers who are actually supplying that raw material. But I would love it if you'd also speak a little bit more to how you're engaging B2C companies that are using your ingredients to make end products.
We found there was such a disconnect between farmers and customers, that farmers really didn't understand what food manufacturers were doing, and similarly, food manufacturers didn't understand what farmers were doing. So in order to challenge the misconceptions there were, we'd worked at really building a community. So once a year we have this Customer and Farmer Appreciation Day. Competitors come, they can be multinationals, medium companies, small companies. Growers come, both conventional, organic. We look at experimental field plots. We go out and visit growers. We also have speakers come in. So Field to Market Canada, or I don't know if anybody knows Lana Shaw from Saskatchewan East Research Farm. She's really involved in the regen ag market. We bring everybody together to kind of hit some of the misconceptions. And the first year we did it, I was on the bus with a buyer, and she saw this field. And she said, "Is that lavender?" We were in Saskatchewan. There's not a lot of lavender grown in Saskatchewan. And I laughed, and I said, I didn't laugh actually, but I said, "Well, that's actually flax." She had been buying flax for 12 years, and she'd never ever seen a field of it. So, in this world we live in, there's a lot of disconnect and a lot of people in their own little corner. So for us as a company, we thought we'll bring people together. So it speaks to that vision of partnering for safe, healthy diets in a sustainable world. Really try and challenge misconceptions and educate as well about the benefits, not just in terms of soil health, biodiversity, but nutrition as well. So I won't keep going here, but one of the companies who worked with like hippies paid the grower to put in intercropping. So Colin Rosengren put in intercropping. It went on fire in social media, and when they did the first press release, it dropped into millions of boxes, literally. And that was a lesson for us, that people want to learn about this, but you have to do it kind of one step at a time, one company at a time. I think that's my soapbox.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Well,
Margaret.
I'll take it from you for a second, Margaret, and just talk, everything. I think, amen to everything that you said. And I'll add just another thing we combat in our industry a lot too. I think a lot of customers, ingredient buyers, are used to buying products that are highly commoditized and everything's the same. And that's one thing we really push on, and we're very focused on taste. And I think a lot of people come in and think, okay, I make, this line with a whey protein, and now I want to make a plant-based line. And that's, one of the things we try to fight is, sure, there can be some differences in taste, but they're certainly not as vast as they imagine. So we have, I think it's, as a very product-driven company, we have an R&D lab here on site with a great kitchen. I mean, having customers in, whether it's doing that, it's the best way to do it. Have them in office here, go through a tasting, really understand all that we can do with our products, have them taste the differences compared to a whey protein, compared to competitors' protein, compared to other proteins they tried 10 years ago, and really just sort of kill that misconception that the taste is necessarily going to be awful and you're going to have to spend a whole formulation of maskers and things of that nature to make it taste good. So a lot of times we're able to fight sort of the price of our product comparison by showing them that, the formulation they were imagining they'd have, or the one that they'd worked on in a lab, or something that was lying around on the shelf from 10 years ago, doesn't need to be your outcome. Come and taste the product, reformulate around really good tasting product, and pulse proteins can go compete at scale with whey and things that aren't plant-based. And I think that's been a real way we've done it. And then a lot of times you have to go to the customer, go do a tasting at their site, or go do it at a trade show. And that's, one sort of unique way we really try to show up and sort of combat sort of the misconceptions around pulse-based proteins.
I better give my 2 cents. I agree on taste. It's a big deal for us too, but we don't we process differently, so taste is a little bit more of a hurdle for us than maybe it is for you guys too. And so we have some proprietary process. We feel we have the best tasting ingredients in the world from peas and faba and things like that. But I think the biggest thing for us and that I see and to just lay it out, when we have customers come and see our plant or audit our facility and stuff like that, since we are integrated right from the farm all the way to the ingredient production, it's crazy. Like, they tour our plant, we go through all our processes, we go through how we do things, and that's my joy. And my brother Vince is the guy who runs our farm, and then we go for a tour of the farm, and at the end of the tour, after they've sat in the combine and seen all the equipment and seen all the shiny things and all the happening and stuff, it's like it's crazy how the customers, I guess they've seen 100 plants, but they haven't rode in a combine before, and they haven't been on a farm and seen how it all happens and everything like that. And that's all they talk about. And every time we chat after, it's like, man, that was so great seeing your farm. And it was like, well, we brought you to see our plant. The farm was the side gig. So it is very interesting. I think the engagement piece on the fact that we're trying to get closer to the consumer, back to where their food comes from, is, I think, what we're all trying to do here. And I think it is the consumer wants that too, and the food manufacturer. And I think that's something we all need to do again, is bring that trust back and let everybody have transparency into where their food comes from.
I want to just take a second to thank you all just for all the work that you are all doing to connect all of the value chain together and get people to see where their food comes from and what can be made from these amazing crops and ingredients. And one follow-up question I had specifically for you, Brett, is that you had just mentioned really briefly that all of those markets are very important in terms of like the higher market in terms of like the actual like food grade products and then the feed market and in between. And I guess like my question for you, not really knowing much about this myself, is there a lot of excitement given the kind of like the higher value of like the food grade market on the part of like growers and others along the value chain? Because these products are supposedly bringing in like higher value.
Yeah, I think that's what we all want as a win, right? Is that more of this product going straight, as close to from the field through to the end consumer in human consumption as possible. That helps our planet, right? Be healthier and everything, less emissions, less processing, and it helps the ROI and the bottom line of everyone involved. We can pay more to the grower if we sell more into the food market, more of our streams, right? Then we make more money too because our margins are better. We obviously need all three, and we treat them all very equally important, but we probably spend more time formulating and nursing our customers in the food because it's the newer market, and whenever you're breaking new ground, it's a lot harder than in the other markets where they're already used to using the product. There's always work there too, but I think that's our role is to create the right products that the food manufacturer wants to make products that the consumer wants, right? And we need to understand them and the gap from what the farmer is often motivated on yield, right? Yield is what makes their bottom line, and we need to work with them to see that there's maybe slightly lower yielding but higher protein, higher quality products that can go into higher value markets and pivot that. And that's, I think, why a lot of us are doing full production contracts and things like that, because we can offer those opportunities and align ourselves with the grower to try to hit those markets. And but it's a heavy lift, and a lot of work to get people to try new things, and well, we're having a lot of fun doing it.
Thank you so much. And thanks for letting me put you on the spot there for 1 second. And I think that leads into our last question before the Q&A, which is you've mentioned some of those challenges specifically like on the demand side to getting people to try new foods and eat things that maybe they're not used to eating. But what I would like to raise this to the rest of the panelists, and Brett, you can also join in. What do you see as the biggest challenges to increasing plant-based food production to meet rising protein demand? And you can speak to the supply side, or you can speak to challenges on the demand side.
Companies need to be brave. They need to understand that actually people have eaten pulses for millennium, right? I mean, who hasn't had baked beans? Who hasn't had black beans? Like pulses have been a part of our diets forever. You think the Three Sisters, the Aboriginal Three Sisters, the Voyageurs who built Western Canada, and they always carried a bag of beans or peas in their canoe. That pulses aren't new. We just have to remind ourselves how useful they've been in history. In 1919, when there was a shortage of wheat, what did the USDA recommend bakers put in bread? It was pea flour. It was bean flour. So there's always this, how can we get people to eat it? I think we need to remind them that they do eat it, that it's not surprising under the sun. It's health by stealth, but it's also, it's really feet on the ground, basic food that we should all learn how to enjoy, but know that we do enjoy it.
And just to piggyback on that too, I think, taste plays such a key role, and you've heard me say it multiple times. And I think that's at least our philosophy here at Pierce, is that, we really believe in making food that people love to eat, and that's changing all the time. Right. But I think right now we have a market where everybody wants to put more protein in their diet. And it's, a really great point that Margaret made. Companies need to be brave. We're trying to be out on the cutting edge as far as we can to improve the taste and make this really, an occasion where people can show up and just enjoy protein and maybe not even think as much about what they're getting in the protein, just caring about protein. And boy, are pulses a way more efficient, economic way, whether it's price wise, sustainability wise, good for the environment. pulses are going to win in the end if we can really get that right. And so that's why we want to make food that people love to eat. And you have to listen to your customers to do it. You have to drive innovation. Like Margaret said, you have to be brave. You have to find new ways to do it all the time. And I think reinventing ourselves, getting in front of customers is just as important as it is possible, because it's such a big moment right now for protein, especially as the world's growing. There's clearly going to have to be more plant-based proteins going to help solve a lot of the problems around the world. So I think just making food that tastes great is what we can all keep working on to make a really great long-term sustainable market here in North America.
Yeah, I appreciate the companies on here for being brave and for working with delicious pulses and products, and adding a little bit to the kind of challenges we're seeing on the demand side. I'd say two of the larger ones. First one is kind of just unfamiliarity. So even though we have pulses, in global cuisines traditionally for millennia, a lot of folks, for instance, in the US, some of the main ways to eat pulses are like in chili at dinner, or refried beans or something, which are great. Don't get me wrong, but if you only have a few ways that to eat pulses, it limits eating opportunities. So I think really expanding consumer, their repertoire of different ways they can include pulses or pulse ingredients or pulse products is really helpful. So it could be, it could be a pasta that's made with pulses instead, or it can be pureeing pulses into your pasta sauce. It can be in breakfast. I don't need to go through an exhaustive list here, but just really increasing, awareness of the different delicious, again, it has to be tasty, like we've heard other panelists say, delicious and convenient ways to incorporate them. And then another one that sort of relates to what we've been talking about is, again, excitement. So I feel like although all of us are very excited about pulses, that isn't always the case for consumers. They might think of them as kind of boring, or, oh, they're healthy and therefore they won't taste good, which again breaks my heart. But we want to increase that excitement that people feel. Pulses are exciting. They have so many benefits. They're so delicious. There are so many different ways that you can enjoy them. And so really just building that enthusiasm, I think, is really beneficial, because when somebody's excited and on board, it becomes part of their identity, part of their habits, and they spread that with other people. So we can all positively impact our social circles and get us all eating more pulses.
I think for me, great information from Margaret, John, Chelsea, awesome. But I think the other thing that I would include is when we talk about great tasting, oftentimes, since we're an ingredient, great tasting means no taste, and it means no color, right? And so you can put something into a food, and it doesn't affect the flavor. It doesn't create needing a whole bunch of other, ingredients in order to make it taste better, or whatever it does. So that's really, I think, what a lot of us end up doing is the great tasting pulses are actually very neutral, and we do have a very neutral product. I think all of us do on the panel here, and work through that, and that's part of it. It has to be nutritious, it has to be whole, you want to maintain the benefits, and the protein and fiber are in the products are huge, because those are the things people are looking for these days to have healthier food. I think the important part right now that I'm seeing in the market is variety is important, right? Like, I don't think we're sitting up here saying people should just have pulses every day and that's all they should eat and they'll be fine, right? There's a whole bunch of different things that you can eat. And the nice part is if you can incorporate pulses more into your daily diet, so it's not once a year that you have pulses, it will just help you be healthier and everything, and be around it. So it needs to be in this new world. There's the whole beans and the whole peas and the whole pulses are great, and I think that's fantastic, and eat as much of that as you can. But for convenience and comfort, and to include it more in the diet in a good way, we make these ingredients and make it so that you can get more pulses into your diet for more variety, and make it work.
Thanks all. So I'm very mindful here because we've gotten a lot of questions. So let's try to take two before we end on our forward-looking question. So we have a question that says, what are you currently doing with byproducts of pulse processing? And how are you thinking about exploring upcycling, like the different side streams from pulse processing?
I'm going to start out by saying we have no byproducts. That our hulls are actually milled into a pea fiber that's 90% total dietary fiber. So there are no byproducts. Yay.
Thanks, Margaret. John?
On ours, I'll say like specifically to upcycling, our pea starch is obviously a big byproduct. Roughly for every pound of pea protein we make, we have two byproducts. Like Margaret, we like to refer to it as a co-product, not a byproduct, but ours is actually upcycle certified. So we've got upcycled certified starch that can go into foods and everything. And I think, the starch market is extremely interesting because, the biggest challenge with our starch being a native pea starch, unlike Brett's having some protein in it, ours is very native, very pure. So it does all the things that other starches do. Well, that's a whole market that's been built on cornstarch, tapioca starch, potato starch. Ours isn't much different. Each one-to-one looks a little bit different. But for the most part, the biggest thing is making companies aware that it exists and that it can be used in all the same ways. So that's been a challenge, but I think now that less product is coming from China and more protein is being made here, we have a much more abundant source of it. So now it's a thing, and it's really getting it into all the different avenues, whether it's food, whether it's pet food stock, whether it's straight feed stock, or whether it's in the industrial market. Some of our most innovative, unique customers I never would have imagined Pulse products went into when I went here are like biodegradable packing peanuts. They basically extrude it the same way we make a protein pellet that goes in, like a little protein crisp that goes into a ball. They make on the styrofoam side. They add some other bioplastic to it and they puff it, and you've got a fully biodegradable packing peanut. So lots of good ways that that's happening. And I think just more being brave, just like we do on the protein side, and pushing the edge of what the product can do is really where we need to go from there to keep kind of bringing value all the way back through the chain to the grower.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. We do move products around. It seems to getting a balance of all your different ingredients, always being all into food seems to be a bit of a tricky balancing act, but we work anywhere from pharmaceutical capsule coatings into packaging, into fire retardants, into there's such a long list, and I'm so far from the R&D guy that I probably am going to mix it up a bit. But we also like pet food and binders and things like that, and but a lot of our flours and our hulls go in, like you say, like Margaret said, for fibers, for the for baked goods or different things like that, as an ingredient. And also the flour, it works well in especially in you get into gluten-free and all different kinds of things like that, right? It's got good fits in those types of ranges. So we're always, obviously the ideal world, we're upcycling everything, right? And then everybody wins. But I think as you grow and as you find new markets, either protein is pulling harder or one or the other. And so it is always a balancing act.
Thank you all. No, it's exciting to hear how this innovation is really fueling the circular economy and making sure that we use all of it. And the final Q&A before we get to what you're most excited about on the horizon for Pulse products and ingredients, we got one question that asked, which product categories are showing unexpected increases in demand for your ingredients? And what financial or market dynamics do you believe are driving this shift?
I can jump on that one. I think one thing's been really interesting, especially over the last 2-3 years, is the growth in breakfast cereal. I think that's huge. If you go to the breakfast cereal aisle now, go and look at what has the word protein tagged on it. You're going to see just an amazing growth in the amount of SKUs that has it. And we're seeing the price point of those come down as well, too. And if you start to check the back of those boxes, you'll see a lot of pulse protein involved in that. Sure, you'll still see some whey protein, you'll see some soy protein, but you're also going to see a lot of pulse proteins there as well, too. And seeing specific retailers like Costco, Target, others really focusing, all the retailers trying to make this really protein forward focus. It's about protein at large. And as a pulse world, we're finding such an easy way to play in that world, and it seems to be really advancing. So I think that one's been really exciting to us, and I'll let Brett talk on it more, but obviously bakery and snack, I think just more proteins, more occasions is the big macro trend that's happening, and pulse ingredient suppliers like ourselves are trying to do our best to move it as many places as possible.
Yes, I guess John, you queued me up. Thank you. No, we do see we've seen a pull that probably was quite unexpected into breads, tortillas, conscious, things like that we always thought it could work well in that environment to some extent, but we're seeing such a pull right now globally. The UK, I think it started really coming on, and it's really caught on, and I think it's a great fit, and it really works well for our products for sure, but also I think for many different ones. I like to laugh because everywhere from Margaret's whole flowers to, John's isolates to our concentrates, many of them are used all in the same products, just in different levels to make the right mix for the recipes. So I don't know that we probably compete at times, but not directly. And really we're all helping each other out to have supply of different things that are needed to make these things go.
I think on the bakery as well side, Brett, when they take pulses and grains and blend them, you can actually really improve your PDCAS, your protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, because when you bring in your pulse, you're bringing in that wonderful lysine. And there's a real move from bakeries to increase protein in a more whole foods way. But often they need to top it up with just a bit of concentrate or isolate to actually make the claim. So it is about all of our ingredients coming together in tandem to make new products.
Thanks, Margaret.
Just getting the innovators and the R&D people excited about it, and the bravery, that's really important, because when the economy's tricky and people see things getting more expensive and they're worried about cuts, people get shy and they pull back. But actually, that's when you have to be most aggressive as an R&D innovator. That's when food companies really have to show what they're made of, by being innovative. Yeah.
So we spent most of this time talking about exciting opportunities for pulse crops and ingredients. But just to wrap up, I'd love it if you could each share just like one exciting opportunity that you're seeing on the horizon for pulse crop and ingredients. And also we got a request from the chat to share what allies across the NGO and public sector can do to advance this work, besides just trying to push for like a shared narrative.
I'll hit the first one quick and then talk quickly on the NGOs. I mean, most exciting thing we're seeing too is just, the continuation of consumers looking to get protein in occasions that you didn't think of before. Clear protein, peptides is huge all of a sudden. We're seeing brands launch with whey all over. We're doing it in the plant-based form as well. So Clear Pea Protein is a product we've launched this year, launched it at Supply Side West. So thinking protein and popsicles, all sorts of things you wouldn't think as a protein source in your diet. The ability to add it there and for the ability to that be a pulse-based crop is super exciting. And I think, on that same frame, I would say, what can NGOs and other people do to help the momentum? I think as we think about feeding people, thinking about feeding people, not just the raw commodity, but also those ingredients as well, too. Like, I think if we're let's give people products that they love to eat, are easy to make, and can get all the nutrients they need.
I want to add on to protein in that nutrition space and say one of the beautiful things about pulses is not only are they rich in protein, but they're rich in fiber. And consumers are finally also excited about fiber. So whether that ends up being, a byproduct in processing, or whether you're having the whole pulse, the fiber is there. And not only is it there, they're basically the richest natural source of dietary fiber. So this is a perfect opportunity to capitalize upon and actually really deliver health benefits. They're satiating, they're delicious, and they fit perfectly in consumer demand. And how can NGOs and others help is really helping just share this message brought with a wide group, and also build collaboration. Because I think there are a lot of us maybe in this space, but we don't always know what everybody else is doing. So helping make those connections and share the passion with chefs, with consumers, with government, with different stakeholders in your circle is really powerful.
In terms of opportunity, and it's related to Chelsea, really, this idea of nutrition, when you think of the great percentage of the population that are on GLP-1 medication, and they really need to eat products that are high in protein, fiber, micronutrients, but low in fat, and there's nothing better than a pulse. So I really think there's an opportunity in the market for people who are on those medications.
I love that.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing topic too. I think for me to touch on new products that I think are a new product that is really cool and exciting to me is and it comes from my kids. Some of my kids, they sit down and they put potatoes and meat on their plate, and they don't want their vegetables, and I don't know what it is about it and stuff. So we always push them to have a balanced plate and stuff, but it's always a fight on the broccoli and whatever else you want to call it, right, on the plate. And so they've now come up with some really good blended products with meat and pulses and things like that. And I think that that's a really great way to compromise and to bring variety into the plate and create really functional and new products. And we're very interested in how that's going to play out.
Well, this has been an excellent discussion. I've learned so much from all of you and have really felt very overjoyed by the excitement that was on this call today. So thank you again. A huge virtual round of applause for our panelists and for Pulse Canada for partnering with GFI on this excellent 3-part web series. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Sarah. Great
everything.
moderator.
Thank you, Margaret.